Nobody tells you that healing will cost you people. They talk about the freedom, the clarity, the peace that comes when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to carry. But they go quiet about the specific loneliness of outgrowing the version of yourself that everyone around you was comfortable with. That part doesn't make it into the inspirational quotes. And if you're in it right now, if you've done real inner work and found yourself standing in rooms that no longer feel like yours, next to people who seem faintly unsettled by who you're becoming, you need to hear this. What you're experiencing is not a sign that something went wrong. It's a sign that something finally went right. But it costs, and the cost is real, and it deserves to be named. Here's the pattern almost no one sees until they're already inside it. When you begin to heal, really heal, not just cope more gracefully, you start withdrawing energy from the systems you built to survive. The hypervigilance that kept you scanning for disapproval. The people-pleasing that kept conflict at bay. The emotional labor you performed daily to make everyone around you comfortable enough that they wouldn't leave. These weren't character flaws. They were intelligent adaptations. Your psyche built them because at some point they worked. But healing means you stop needing them to work. And that's where things get complicated. Carl Jung understood something about the structure of the psyche that most modern self-help skips entirely. He saw that we don't just carry our own pain, we carry function inside our relationships. Meaning, you were not only a person to the people around you, you were a role, the stable one, the understanding one, the one who never needed too much, the one who absorbed tension and returned calm. And the people in your life, without knowing it, without malice, organized themselves around that function. They leaned into the shape of you. When you change shape, it disturbs the architecture. This is why healing can feel, from the outside, like you've become difficult. You're not more difficult. You're just no longer willing to be load-bearing in other people's emotional structures at the expense of your own. That distinction matters, but it doesn't always prevent the fallout. Some people will call it selfishness. Some will say you've changed, and they won't mean it as a compliment. Some will drift. Some will push back with surprising force. And the cruelest moments are the ones where you can see so clearly that their reaction is not about you, and it still lands in your chest like something sharp. This is the hidden cost. Not that healing hurts. You were prepared for that. The cost is that healing can temporarily increase your isolation, even as it increases your integrity. Jung called the process of becoming who you actually are individuation. He was precise about the fact that it was not comfortable. It was not a return to innocence or simplicity. It was a confrontation with the shadow, with the false self, with the accumulated compromises of a life lived for external approval rather than internal truth. The false self is not a villain. It was a gift you gave yourself when you didn't have better options. It learned to smile at the right times, to soften the wrong feelings, to stay small enough to stay safe. It helped you belong when belonging felt like survival. But the false self has a ceiling. It can get you through. It cannot get you home. And here is what nobody says about the moment you start dismantling it. Grief. Not the grief of a loss exactly, but the grief of recognition. The slow, quiet ache of understanding how much of your life was spent managing the comfort of people who never once thought to manage yours. How many conversations you edited before you spoke. How many needs you preemptively buried to avoid being a burden. How fluent you became in a language that was never really yours. That recognition is necessary, but it is heavy. And there's a particular kind of exhaustion in seeing something clearly for the first time. Because once you see it, you cannot continue in the old way without knowing exactly what you're doing. Consciousness, in this sense, is not immediately a relief. It is first a responsibility. The shift, and there is a shift, it does come, begins not with becoming someone new, but with allowing yourself to grieve who you had to be. This step gets bypassed constantly. People want to get to the empowered version, the boundary-holding, clarity-speaking, self-honoring version, and they skip the mourning. But the mourning is not optional. The parts of you that overfunctioned for years, they were trying to keep you loved. They were doing their best with what they understood. You don't transcend them by rejecting them. You integrate them by witnessing what they were protecting, and finally offering that frightened inner architecture something it never had, the understanding that you are not in that much danger anymore. That's what integration means in Jungian terms, not the elimination of the wounded patterns, but their transformation through being seen. The shadow does not dissolve under judgment. It loosens under compassionate attention. When you stop running from the cost of healing, when you let yourself feel the loneliness, the grief, the disorientation of no longer recognizing yourself in old mirrors, something unexpected happens. You stop needing the healing to be invisible. Most people want to heal quietly, change without disruption, grow without anyone noticing the seams. And there's wisdom in privacy, in protecting your process. But the deeper impulse is often the old one. Don't make waves. Don't inconvenience. Don't let your transformation become anyone else's problem. That impulse is worth examining, because sometimes the bravest part of healing is letting it be visible, letting it change the room, letting someone see that you are no longer available to be who you were without apologizing for the rearrangement. You're allowed to outgrow things that once saved you. You're allowed to find that a relationship built entirely on the old version of you no longer has room for who you're becoming. You're allowed to feel grief and clarity simultaneously, to love someone and acknowledge that the dynamic you shared was quietly costing you your selfhood. Those two things are not contradictions. They are the texture of honest transformation, and the relationships that survive your healing, the ones that don't require you to shrink back into the old shape to be accepted, those become something you've likely never fully experienced before. Real witness, mutual presence, the particular relief of being known without performing. That is what you're moving toward. Not a life without cost. Not a self so healed it no longer feels, but a life where what you carry is actually yours, where your energy returns to you instead of endlessly flowing outward to hold structures that were never your responsibility, where the silence in a room feels like rest instead of threat, where you stop translating yourself before you speak. Here is what the long arc of this work reveals. If you stay with it long enough to find out, the people who can meet the real you are not rare because real connection is rare. They're rare in your current life because you made yourself so consistently comfortable to be around that you filtered them out. Authenticity calls to authenticity. When you start showing up as yourself, unedited, unmanaged, genuinely present, you become visible to people who respond to that. You become findable in a way you weren't before, but you have to be willing to be unfindable to the others first. That's the cost. That's the particular loneliness that has no name in the self-help world, because naming it might discourage people from doing the work at all. Do the work anyway. Not because it will be clean or fast or appreciated by everyone watching, but because there is a version of your life on the other side of this. Not perfect, not painless, but yours, that has been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to stop maintaining a self you never chose. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. He understood that privilege has a price. He didn't look away from that, and neither should you. The hidden cost of healing is real. It asks something serious of you. But what it gives back is the one thing all that years of over-functioning, people-pleasing, and self-erasure was never able to buy. The quiet, unshakable experience of belonging to yourself. That's not a destination. It's a direction, and you're already moving in it.